Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Griffo. It's so great to have you. I'd love for you guys to officially introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you guys.
I'm Jenny Griffo,
And I'm Mike Griffo.
and we own Griffo Distillery. We launched Griffo Distillery about 6.5 years ago. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And it's been a slow and steady process to build kind of what we have today. Let's see, I come from Seattle originally, and Mike San Diego. And we both met when we were in grad school. Mike was finishing his PhD at UCSC in physics, and I was getting my master's in international development at Stanford University.
Cool.
And so we met and fell in love, and the rest has been an adventure.
So those are very different degrees than booze.
Yeah, we're very different people. On our first date.
Oh, God.
Yes, let's hear it.
Yeah, now we're talking about dating. Okay.
On our first date, I was around all these international people who that was my world at that time of life. And so on our first date, Mike was like, yeah, I know 5 languages. And I was like, oh my God, that is so hot. Like, oh my God, I just love when people are so internationally exposed. And like the 3rd or 4th date, I was like, we finally had time to talk more about the languages. I was like, so wait, which languages do you know? And he was like, well, Java, HTML.
Nice.
Are they? I don't even know.
That's awesome.
I feel like that just highlights our differences so well.
That being said, I do speak more international languages than Jenny does.
It's very true.
So,
I'm horrible at language.
read into it whatever you want to.
That's hilarious. I love it. That is the best story.
But yeah, but I mean, to talk to your question more is just that, yeah, I mean, we have really different sort of approaches and skill sets and
like right and wrong, good and bad.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that our different approaches really, make us a great team, both at home and in the distillery.
So how did you guys transition from your original kind of pathways to distilling? Because those seem very separate paths.
Yeah, when you're a student in physics in a doctorate program, then you're getting trained to be a professor because all of your advisors are professors, and that's just what you know and what they know, and that's the path. And so, right. When I was finishing my doctorate, that was during the crash in 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were no professorships because all universities just contracted. And so, I started branching out into other sort of, going into industry and figuring out what I want to do. And it was around that time where we came up with the idea of launching the distillery. But we had no money because we were poor students.
Right.
And so we had to go out and get jobs and figure out how the world worked. But it seems really different, but it's actually really well connected, because when I was a student in the lab conducting experiments in quantum mechanics, chemists would synthesize materials for us, and then we would redistill them to purify them so that we could get really clean signals in our experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was already distilling for a decade before I switched over to tastier experiments.
Yeah, before you could enjoy them properly.
Yes.
And for me, the through line is that I actually wasn't very happy in the field that I had chosen. It was one of those things where I dreamed of this, international work, because I came from a background of kind of nonprofit development since I've been young.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in very rural Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, East Africa, South Asia, and it was really rough. I was gone from home about half the time. I was on planes, 10 hours out of any week. I was on a plane for 10 to 20 hours.
Mm.
And I'm much more community based. And I feel like that's actually been what has brought me into working with Mike at the distillery more and more, is how community based our distillery has ended up being, and how that's ended up being maybe one of our most favorite parts about owning this business is that we get to be a part of our community.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when I raise my kids, I want my kids to help them think about, when you choose a career, you have to think about what the lifestyle is of that career, not just what you're intellectually doing.
Right.
They both need to be a good fit for you and how you want to live. And I didn't really get that early.
Yeah, I think it's all about balance, and sometimes you only I know that that's something I learned later on in my career after being kind of in hotel, food and beverage for the first 10 years of it after college. And I was like, maybe not.
Yeah. Kind of part of growing up is going, now, how am I going to live happy and not just the rat race or something? Like,
yeah.
So
And that's
your
the other problem
community,
with professorships is that when you want to become a professor somewhere, there's maybe only like 2 openings on earth that are looking for someone that does what you do.
right?
So
They're hard to come by, aren't they?
they're hard to come by, and by default, you probably end up in
North Dakota,
somewhere where you don't want to be.
Yeah, definitely. So your guys' community, you guys are located in Petaluma. And how did you guys end up there? If you both are Southern California and Washington State folks.
I mean, we were both in grad school in the Bay Area, and I did my undergrad at Berkeley, so I've been in the Bay Area for more than a decade, and Jenny was in the Bay Area for more than a decade. And so when we met here in the Bay Area, we have, it's kind of like meeting in the middle. We both love the Bay Area.
I describe our geographical overlap as a Venn diagram with very little overlap that exists around the kind of the Bay Area. Maybe goes a little tiny bit more north and a little bit more south, but not much. I don't like it much hotter, and he doesn't like it much cooler.
Yeah.
But we were out in New York saving money. He was working on Wall Street, and I was helping to run an education organization out there. And we were saving money. And when it was time to come back, we were discussing between Santa Cruz and Petaluma. Mike's family had relocated to Petaluma while we had been out in New York. So it was a hard decision for a little bit, but then Mike's mother was sick with multiple myeloma. And so she's that matriarch you dream of, the most wonderful woman. And so it was a no-brainer. Like, it was bring our kid, our little 3-month-old, and move close to grandma and spend as much time as we can with her.
Yeah, it was either really good surf in Santa Cruz or family. And we chose to be in your family.
Yeah. You can always drive to Santa Cruz and surf.
Yeah. Or suffer the waves here.
Good luck. Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm born and raised here in Sonoma County, and I've left and come back a handful of times. And I was actually living in San Diego before I relocated this last time, and I came back because my mother was sick as well. And yeah, I mean, it plays a big part in your choices and for all the right reasons. I think it's really important. And, it just is kind of back to that, personal ethos about community and what's important to you. And yeah, so we totally get those.
We're obsessed with it here now. I mean, it was the best non-decision we ever made. It was a no-brainer to go be near Mike's mother. And then when we got here, we're like, well done, family, for picking.
Yeah, nice.
We're very lucky.
Well, nicely chosen.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We've loved it more and more every day that we've been here.
Yeah, it is. It's a really great community. And I've loved to see how Petaluma has just continued to evolve over I feel like in the last 10 years in and of itself, it's really taken on a whole new kind of life, so to speak, and just its own kind of, I don't want to say gentrification, but kind of. And I think it's really exciting to see that change.
And you were mentioning how you maybe wanted us to bring up kind of what our advice to anyone would be who's looking at this field. And I think for me, you're getting to it right there, where to me, there's 2 ways to play the game of owning a distillery. There's to be really hyper local and really focused on your community. And there's, and then the other one is to be very sales, distribution driven, where you have very, you don't even need a distillery to do that. You can contract work, and you can get, and go after and keep your margins really low. And so for me, looking back, I didn't realize that we were really choosing to be that kind of hyper local community distillery. We kind of thought we could play both games. And as we've been learning, we've been realizing more and more that we would not exist today without our community. 100%, we would not have made it this far. And so I think maybe to other people wanting to open a distillery, kind of going in knowing which bucket you want to be in would be a very smart thing to start out with. Knowing who you are. We're not real salesmen. We're really not very good at it. And so, but we'll sell you something probably if you're talking to us and you hear our passion, sharing with our community about what we make.
Right.
That's very different than going out and talking with the big distributors and the big wholesale accounts and how to get those. That's a very different mentality.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, those are definitely different. directions.
Different people kind of are good at different things.
Yeah, and I'm so production oriented. Like I just love working with the still and the recipes and development, and like I love making what we make, and it's terrible at the same time because you release something new and you're all nervous that if other people are going to like it as much as you do. And with that in mind, it's we try to do what we do best, and we try to do it as good as we can. And yeah, I mean, like Jenny said, most other craft distilleries don't actually even make their own stuff. And it's a huge advantage to not do that. I mean, they aren't spending time cleaning tanks and developing recipes.
16 pumps and
Yeah.
trench drains.
or they're not spending, most other distilleries don't even make their own recipes. And so that's a huge advantage because all they need is they've got a product in a package and they're just out there selling it, and they're not hiring production people, they're just hiring more salespeople.
Mhm.
And so there's this huge advantage that they have to go out there and get their product on the market. And it's
That being said, I think there's also huge advantages to what we're doing, because we own this distillery, we are a part of our community, and they see that we're able to. And the more the time has gone on, we've realized more and more about who we are as people and how we want to run our company. And so we're doing more and more, and we have our solid brand that we always are working on and evolving and adding new lines to. But we're also doing a lot of contract distillation. So it's like, do what you love to do. Like we like to work with winemakers and other companies who want to launch a beautiful new brand and kind of help them bring that product to life.
Mhm.
So just we're getting to do, the more we learn about who we are and how we want to run this, the more we get to do what we love to do and not, be out there beating on Bevmo's door trying to get attention.
Right.
I love you, Bevmo, but you're hard.
And so, yeah, I mean, we're doing what we want to do, and I think we've made the right choices along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I love, building those other relationships with other members in the community, other, beverage brands and things like that. I think that's just as, again, goes back to what your kind of direction is for the company as being community-based, which is great.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned your brands. So what is your current spirit lineup look like?
Right now we have 2 gins that are on the market. We have our Scott Street Gin, which is our flagship. That's sort of a London dry style, and it just works with everything. It's delicious.
Nice.
We also have our barrel gin. Well, I guess I should say one more thing about the London or the Scott Street Gin is that we use fresh local Meyer lemons off our trees.
Yum.
All the ingredients are organic or wild harvested because they just taste better. And we like to support that, but also the flavor is just by far way better.
And what I think is great about our gin too is it's really balanced. Mike fights really hard with those botanicals to get them each to kind of come in the right alignment whenever he's doing the gin runs. And I like to joke that Mike is the nicest person you'll ever meet unless he's making gin.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Because he's just so stressed about, oh man, what's happening with this botanical and what's this flavor profile? I've got to tune this back and I've got to do more of this. And he's just fighting with it to get it where he wants it.
Gin's tricky. It's such, you need that balance, and there's so many different botanicals that go into it. We use 9 botanicals, and to get the right balance with all of those, like if you
see, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that makes me a little stressed out just listening to you.
Right.
And if you have a flaw because of one of them, sometimes you'll fix that problem and you'll uncover another one. And
right.
And so it's stressful, but
yeah, I can imagine.
Fun. He likes to do hard things, so it's.
I like the challenge. Yeah. And I like a good gin. So
yeah.
So our barrel gin is a really beautiful gin. It's aged in Chardonnay barrels that we get locally, and it adds. We only do it for about 4 to 6 months, just enough to add a little bit of flavor into it. It's our Scott Street gin that's just aged just a little bit. So it's a really beautiful product. It's soft and slightly sweet from the sugars from the Chardonnay.
I bet that's nice.
It's super lovely.
Yeah, and so mainly we're looking for the integration between the Chardonnay and the gin, but then you get a little bit of oak influence in there that I think adds, it adds a little bit of color and it adds this nice softness to it. But then when you mix a cocktail with it, you need to play with it a little bit differently than you would a dry gin.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call it actually sweet, but it's not a dry gin.
Yeah.
And so
sure, yeah, it's probably got a little bit more like a rounder mouthfeel to it, but
yeah, exactly.
My favorite
Yeah.
cocktail with it right now is pomegranate juice and Phaedra's Flora Luna's cardamom clove syrup,
Ooh, yum.
and then fresh lemon juice.
Yeah, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, and a little bit of soda water on top. It's really beautiful.
Very tasty.
And
so
then
we have the vodka.
Yep, then we have vodka. And the vodka is clean and round and soft. It's corn based. And it's great for playing with.
We have 3 whiskeys right now. We have our Stony Point whiskey, which is a high rye bourbon. Mike does grain on fermentation and grain on distillation, and so it's got this real grainy, nutty kind of
marzipan. We do an open tank fermentation.
Oh, cool.
We pitch our own fresh yeast every time, and that basically produces the alcohol and some other sort of flavor congeners. But then once that finishes off, the wild stuff in our terroir here takes over. And so we're getting wild yeasts and bacteria that just take over. And that's the most fun part, because over the course of like 3 or 4 days, we're tasting and it sours up and you get all this incredible character that comes through.
Yeah.
And then once you distill that in the presence of alcohol, all those acids and esters evolve into more fruity sort of characters. And so if you taste our Stony Point, you end up getting these like apricot and these other sort of notes that come from that wild fermentation. So it's a high rye. We balance it out with a lot of barley as well. And all of the grains that go into that are also organic.
Nice.
And what's next?
Well, our stout we usually have in, but we are currently sold out of the stout. And our stout started as a relationship with 101 North. They had a stout beer that was a little bit aged out, and so we distilled it and aged it, and it was so incredible. We wanted to do more. So Mike kind of tweaked the recipe to make it actually be able to be a whiskey. It's because there's no, we can't have hops and sugars and those kind of things in it to be a whiskey. And that's a favorite of many people's. And then right now we have a single malt rye. Single malt barley.
Single malt barley, yeah.
Barley, yeah. Tell them about it.
Yeah, so the single malt is that's fermented and distilled in the way that you would expect a single malt to be, but then we hop it. And that hop character carries through in the end spirit as like more of like almost like a bergamot black tea kind of.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, it's, our single malt, it's not peated, it's not smoked, so don't think of it as like some sort of scotch that's like Talisker or something like that. It's more of a clean sort of Highland style.
I love how it's very light and then surprisingly complex. Like it doesn't just overwhelm you with flavor. It's kind of subtle, but really, really interesting. Like lots to think about as you sip it.
Yeah, and we threw that into some used barrels because we didn't want to destroy it with a bunch of oak. And then we let that age for about 4 years.
Wow.
And so it's got a lot of nuance, and
it's got really interesting, complex flavors going on.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Then there's our cold brew coffee liqueur, which is a big favorite. That's
I have a bottle at home currently.
Yes, it is a really fun spirit and our liqueur. And so we partnered with Equator Coffee and Tea to make that product. We use their Mocha Java blend, and we cold brew it here in-house. And then Mike whips it up, and it is so fun to make cocktails with. We found that you can sub it for any rum, like a dark rum. And yes, it's crazy. It's
That's
like
a good idea.
Perfect substitution. And then our favorite local cocktail, or here out of the distillery, is horchata, vodka, our cold brew coffee liqueur, mixed together with a powdered sugar cinnamon rim. It's just delicious.
Yes, I'll take one of those to go. Thank you.
Yes.
So delicious.
Yes, that's our lineup. We have a rye whiskey coming.
Yep.
Sometime soon.
That's exciting.
We harvested a bunch of persimmons.
Oh.
So we have a persimmon and liqueur in tank.
It's insane.
And it's just delicious.
Never had anything like it before.
The problem is figuring out exactly how we want to present it. So
time and
Right. Things are kind of hectic and it's,
They're a little busy.
yeah, you guys are busy with one project and it's hard to know maybe when the right time to release something new is, but I'm excited for that. That sounds delicious and a really unique, I don't know if I've ever heard of it, anything like that.
I've never heard of anyone doing it before, and
You guys froze there for a second. Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Yeah.
I
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. My fiance can edit it all out and he'll just sync it together.
Cool.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Mike, what you're saying, you were persimmon, you haven't heard or seen anything like that?
Yeah, I've never heard of anyone doing a persimmon in spirits before, and I mean, my inspiration was that one fall, winter, we were eating persimmons, and it's such a delicate, nuanced flavor that I just wanted to capture it and put it in a bottle, and so
Yeah.
that's what we did. And now the difficult part is, just making a good plan on how I want to present it and what levels, intensities, and all that sort of stuff we want to do with it. So.
Well, that sounds like a fun add to the lineup for sure.
Yeah. That's definitely a small specialty sort of release that we'll end up doing, and that's kind of fun. One fun thing that we get to do, because we do have a distillery, is that we get to do really small, fun projects and release them in small batches. And so,
Cool.
Like our single malt, that's a small batch. We've had other whiskeys that we released in small batches, and the persimmon we're going to release in small batch, Nucino, always fun small projects.
Yeah, that's great. It's nice to be able to play around and have your kind of core staple spirits that are your tried and trues, but to be able to continue to play around. I mean, that's the fun of it, right? That's part of the fun of being, like you said, having a distillery. And
Yeah,
I think it's great, making seasonal stuff too. I mean, because there are so many great things, especially being in this area, to turn around and infuse, and get creative with. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So where can I know the ABC laws have kind of changed recently and there's some leeway with stuff. So if people were wanting to purchase any Griffo products, where can they do that?
Our website, griffodistillery.com, has a shopping option, and we do shipping across the state, and we do hand sanitizer across the country right now.
Awesome. And you guys also do have a pickup. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So for Petaluma 94952 and 94954, we do delivery every day between 5 and 7. If you order before 4, you'll get it on your doorstep between 5 and 7 that evening. Orders over $50 are free delivery, and under $50 are just $5. Yeah. And then we have pickup. We have a drive-up service 11 to 5 every single day of the week right now. You can call in your order, or you can email, or you can just pull up and give a honk, and we come out to your car with masks on and sanitizer.
Yeah. Very great.
Fully safe.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It was so much fun chatting with you guys. It's always a pleasure. I love Griffo, and I look forward to being able to come in hopefully soon and enjoy a tasting and cocktail. But if not, then I'll just drive by and buy one.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Yeah.
Be well.